China, because if China awakes, China will shake the world. And we were going to do China Shakes the World. So fortunately, we did not choose that and have it in place before the earthquake.
I mean, I guess when it came down to it, we looked at all four of these programs, and we saw that while they're each very different, the common thread really was how this, capitalist kind of spirit is really driving the country. And yet, at the same time, it's not a democracy, clearly. And reminding people in a way, it's supposed to remind people in a way that you can be a capitalist system and not a democracy. Capitalism is an economic theory. It's not a political one, and so that they don't, they're not necessarily incompatible.
Nick?
I think the title's perfect because for most people, at least for me, just speak for myself, anybody that's the People's Republic of something or other is basically a Leninist system, right? And so the overarching political system is a Leninist system. But it's the People's Republic of Capitalism, and that means it's basically a market economy. And I think China is very clearly a market economy. One of the disadvantages of film is being able to show how much transformation there's been in terms of the characteristics of a market economy over 30 years. I mean, just take education, for example. School leavers 30 years ago were assigned jobs and almost never changed their jobs in their entire professional life. Now people have to go out and find jobs. If they don't like their job, they can quit. If their employers don't like them, they can be fired. Wages are determined in the market rather than according to some schedule of wages that are set by some bureaucracy in the capital. So I think it's very, very much a capitalist system and a competitive system for the most part, but it's still a one-party political system, and I think People's Republic captures that perfectly. Every other place I can think of that's called People's Republic of something is a one-party state.
I think there's to not be a democracy. To not be a democracy, Alan is not representative of every young person, although somebody who's spent his junior year of high school here, Americans would assume, well, he's seen America, so he'll be that way. And so we lean on him a little bit heavily, and there's certainly lots of discontented young people. But Fareed Zakaria has done this very well. The sense that the world yearns for democracy and wants Proposition 13 on every single vote is that the democracy is not what people yearn for, and there is, first of all, a yearning for a decent living, and then after that, it really is wanting an end to corruption and fair administration of some legal system where it's applied fairly across the board, and that's the level of discontent and where things come, and I think it was important to say that you just don't get people saying, why can't we have democracy? And Americans, particularly in the Bush administration, have leaned so heavily on that word that we've lost some sense of what it means.
I might add a comment here, because I work with a lot of students in China, and your question about the future of the party, I think the answer really lies in the interview with that young Alan and what Alyssa said about the 90-year-old woman. The party may have lost its sort of moral force for the Chinese people, but as long as it delivers economic development and progress, the Chinese people, the majority of the Chinese people, I'd say over 90%, are living better today than they have. And as long as the party can deliver a better standard of life, they will keep their loyalty. They will be like Alan. He trusts the government. But if China should retrogress on their development, and if capitalism does not any longer work for China, then the party will have a problem. And I think only then will there be a problem. I don't really hear from my students that they are yearning for democracy in the Western sense. China has its own definition of democracy.
Well, and the deal with the devil is they are putting kids through college. I mean, they've opened up college and they're graduating well-educated engineers, scientists, whatever. And if they don't grow at the 10%, it won't be the peasants who rise up and overthrow things. What is dangerous is when you have college, well-educated college graduates who can't get jobs. And those are the people who have led revolution after revolution. And they've got to get jobs for those people.
I saw a hand back there. We've had 3 men, so let's have a female back there.
I've actually recently moved to Western North Carolina, and in the 2 years since I've been there have been 3 factory closings in the area where I am. And the first 2, I know the jobs went to China, their Trade Adjustment Act, so I was able to look it up. The last one, the jobs went to Bogota. And I inquired about that with someone who worked at that plant, and he said, oh yeah, we can't afford to, China's getting too expensive. We're going to Latin America. And I was wondering if there's any sense at all in China of their international competitiveness, and if there's even any truth to that things that were going to China are now going elsewhere.
Well, I think there's a very keen sense of the global environment and whether China is competitive or whether more investment's going to go to Southeast Asia or Latin America or somewhere else. But you have to start with the basics, and there was a lot of emphasis in the clips we saw on China's cheap labor. There are many, many places that have much cheaper labor than China. All of India has wages that are about 40% those in China. The entire sub-Saharan African continent has wages that are cheaper than in China. But China has some other advantages. Their labor is not the lowest. It is relatively low, certainly compared to the U.S. But they've developed the infrastructure that allows them to interact with the global economy. They have a relatively well-trained, they have a high level of literacy, particularly for females that do a lot of these factory jobs, as we saw very vividly. And they have a very welcoming attitude towards foreign direct investment. So a lot of firms have gone there over the last 20 years. Some other countries don't have those characteristics, and they can't, low wages alone is not enough. So even though, and wages have been going up in China, this is, I think, with a lot of the press commentary in recent years makes it sound like wages have just started to go up. But as the film pointed out, and as Thomas said, they've been growing at 10% for 30 years. Wages have been going up 10, 15% per year outside of agriculture in China for more than a decade. And that's how people's lives have improved so much. But they've been able to have productivity gains that have offset those wages, so that what economists call unit labor costs have not gone up very much, because if people become more productive, then firms can pay them a higher wage, and the cost of the goods being produced don't go up. So certainly some very low-end factories in China are losing out to other regions. There are lots of verified reports on factory closings in southeast China, closer to the coast, where foreign investment was initially highly concentrated. So a combination of factors, rising wages that are going up even more rapidly, the appreciation of their currency, some enforcement of environmental standards, which is raising some manufacturing costs, a combination of things has meant that some low value added manufacturing is migrating away to Vietnam or other places south of China, and maybe even some to Bogota. But I think the message is that the theme of this program about interdependence can be expanded well beyond just the United States and China. It's just very interesting in the case of the U.S. and China, since they're two, the largest economy and the 4th largest economy in the world, and have a very big trade relationship, and a lot of other elements of interdependence, including the fact that we borrow so much money from China to support our credit-oriented lifestyle.
Okay, let's take a look. How about over here? Right there.
Thank you, Shao. I'm fascinated by the documentary. It's also because Chongqing is where my father met my mother 50 years ago and got married.
Chongqing women are gorgeous.
Oh yes, that's also what I believe in. My question is, you talk about the economic dependency between the two countries.